So hi, Afeni. Thank you so much for joining me on Millennials Planning.
Hi, how are you? Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm great. How are you?
I'm okay. It's been a long day, big stuff happening over at FHL. But I'm grateful. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah, so you just had Brianna Joy Gray on, and you're going to have Cornell West very soon.
Mm.
That's so exciting. You guys are really hitting the big time. And you started like what, like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I feel like.
Yeah, I think like 4 months ago. Yeah, we're
Wow,
taking some
that's
pretty big swings right now.
yeah. But you all deserve it. I mean, seriously, everybody on FHL is smart and insightful. Like I watch you guys more than possibly any other show at this point.
Mm. Well, thank you for the support. We're
Yeah,
definitely happy to have it. Happy to be in community with you. So.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your adventures at the Capitol recently. So we just had I don't even know what to call it exactly, a quote unquote protest at the Capitol to extend the eviction moratorium. And you joined, I think you said like a day or two after it started, or a day after it started.
Yeah, a day after.
Uh-huh. What was it like when you first got there? Like did you see like all the big names and there was a bunch of people, or was it kind of like what's going on?
So the turnout was pretty low in the beginning, you know, and I really blame that on the fact that they did not have like a good comm strategy on the ground. And it was like a constant conversation for the entire action. Like, where's the messaging? What's the comm strategy? Like, how are we getting outreach to people for more people to actually come and show up here? And I think there was just a lot of like fuss around like Capitol Police and like how all that stuff would be handled if it was like a protest and they would escalate. Like it was just all these kind of like, I'm not sure if they were excuses or not. It's just like just a bunch of different reasons on why we couldn't like escalate the protest. Because I even asked them, I asked Cori Bush and AOC like, how can we start to organize a more national protest to put pressure on these Democrats, to put pressure on the White House, because people need housing. And we started like brainstorming ideas. And then, I put together a document and everything. I was started to plan. And then they were like, oh, we changed strategies. So they decided to like de-escalate because I guess Democratic leadership was starting to like reach out to them. And shortly after that, like Chuck Schumer came and a bunch of Democrats came and Adam Schiff came. It was like just a bunch of really random, like higher level Democratic establishment figures that were showing up here at
Yeah.
the Capitol. And it was just like, it was just so performative for a lot of them. Truly. It was definitely a photo op for a lot of them.
Oh, I'm sure from the footage I've seen, at least. Yeah, for sure. I can even see it. So what was your plan? What was your plan that they dumped and went in another direction for?
So I just said we should do a national tent city and like set up tents at city halls across the country in every district that these Democrats went home to.
Yeah.
Because people are probably getting evicted in their district.
Yes.
It's almost 11 million people that are dealing with this. Like, so,
It was really
they didn't want to. I told them, I was like, yeah, use your email list to do outreach. Like, I use your email list to do fundraising. You can do your email list. You can use your email list to do outreach.
mm-hmm.
But no, they didn't do it. So
Wow. I mean, that's an awesome idea, and I fully support that. Hopefully, we'll actually do that because this only affected 11 million renters, right? And that's actually only 26% of the renters in America. So we're talking about Florida mainly. We're talking about the South and a little bit of Texas, like half of Texas, and that stuff is going to spread. I mean, where does like every tropical storm come from on the East Coast? It comes from fucking Florida. You know what I'm saying? That stuff is going to sweep right up to us. Like, we're going to get it in no time. So I really don't, I personally don't see this as much of a win. What do you think about that?
I think that, for Cori Bush and the squad, this was a win because they got to flex their power and make the Democratic establishment come to them and meet them where they're at. So as far as like the squad and the halls of Congress are concerned, this was a win for them. Do I love the framing that, Alex said live when she was like, oh, stop being negative Nancy's? Absolutely not, because the conversations that I would have with her were about, why wasn't the initial ask like rent cancellation and financial assistance? Because people are in debt. So if y'all aren't going to do something about the debt, does it really matter how long you extend the moratorium? People are not going to be able to find jobs to pay whatever rental debt they might be in, and they're going to be risking eviction at whatever point anyway.
Yep.
So what are we going to do to prevent that and prevent people from this problem? And it was, oh, well, Ilhan put out legislation in March for rent cancellation and it didn't really go anywhere. And it's like, well, did you use your email list to let people know that you did that? So people would know and organize around that and put pressure on the White House. Like, you can't keep playing softball, and they are really playing softball, and that's the problem. And and people always hate when I say this, but I mean, I understand to a certain extent they're fearful of certain things. The Tea Party was allowed to do what it does because the Tea Party is founded on white supremacy, just like this country is. And white supremacy does not threaten capitalism. White supremacy does not threaten the power structure of America. So they are allowed to fucking pull the Republican Party to the right, because no matter what, it's still going to be a capitalist, genocidal, white supremacist country. But trying to implement socialism, there's going to be a harder pushback on that because you're getting pushback from both sides, from both corporate wings of the one party. So it's just like, it's like, I get it, but like the whole point of y'all being there was to be organizers and to be activists. So like, if we're not actually organizing people, then like, what is the point of like coalescing around y'all and y'all's campaigns when we could be investing in mutual aid?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially when like 5 minutes after it ended, Cori Bush put out a text or whatever it was, right, to her email list asking for money. She didn't put out a text to her about the actual, like, come down and join me at the Capitol, did she? I don't think so. Unreal.
Honestly, like, if you're gonna fundraise for anything, like start a freaking like rent fund or something. Like, fundraise for that. Like, do some grassroots fundraising for a rent fund from all of your donors, since y'all have the reach to do so. Y'all don't want to actually fundamentally solve these problems, and that's what makes me a little bit skeptical about electoral politics and the squad in general, because it's just like, we keep running to the same problem. So like, how many times are we gonna do the same thing and expect different results? Like, only insane people do that. So it's just, I'm ready personally to organize power structures outside of the government. I'm ready to organize and build power that is more community-based, that is collectively decided on amongst the many of us and not just the rich few of us. And it's just really time that us as organizers, as podcasters, as activists, as leaders on the left, to actually move towards the type of society we want to see and make our politics an action.
Absolutely. Well said. Absolutely. And you run a mutual aid organization, right?
Yeah, I'm a core organizer for Freedom Fighters DC. So we all run it together. There's no hierarchy.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Definitely shout out to you guys, and please donate if you can.
I'm saying, yeah, please.
Yes. For sure. That's awesome. Yeah. So I have a couple more questions about the Capitol. I'm interested to know, like, who were the organizers on the ground? I think you mentioned, well, you obviously, but you mentioned like Working Families Party was there. So like, yeah, because one of the things that mystified me was how come it didn't get so, crowded. like it should have been, obviously. Like literally, they could literally just do one tweet and people would show up. It's not even like that. But so you're telling me that it was a concern about the Capitol Police and like, they didn't have permits maybe for the protest at first. So
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, they probably would not have given them a permit to protest on the Capitol stairs. Like that just wasn't gonna happen. There were like a bunch of stupid rules that they put in place too. Like Capitol Police is like, you can't lay down, you can't have chairs, you can't, like, we couldn't do chants. And if we did put I do know that if they did put a tweet out that said basically, join us, do this, do that, that turns it into a protest, which means Capitol Police can escalate. But if people just casually showed up and things like that. And this is where I feel like there should have been more connection with the local grassroots organizations to do the type of outreach that they couldn't do.
Right.
And that was my biggest frustration with the whole thing, is that I feel like they did not go far enough. Their ask was not big enough. And they really could have put pressure on the White House, and they did not. So like, it's better than nothing. Like, I'm not saying that we should completely shit on them, because I mean, the Biden administration and the Democrats were just going to be prepared to just let people get evicted, like, and then just let that shit pass. Like, no one's going to see it. Like, people, like 7 million to 11 million people weren't going to materially feel their safety being stripped from them because their housing is no longer available. Like, they were going to let that happen. And, Cori Bush did stand up and say, like, okay, no, but why wasn't this done earlier? And why weren't the asks bigger?
100%, 100%. Absolutely. And what gets me is that, I mean, I appreciate that the people in the worst affected areas for the Delta variant are going to be hopefully a little bit more covered if the Supreme Court doesn't change its mind. But, there are 75% of the renters in this country that have been affected by COVID over the past year and a half, that have lost their jobs, and maybe they never even had COVID. Maybe they just lost their job because, they were working in the airplane industry, or maybe they had a store closing and they couldn't find another job, whatever. I mean, there's a million reasons. So where are these people going to find help? I mean, that's the real question. Like, not only does this affect such a tiny portion of the rental population, but it does it for such a short period of time, and there is no solution at the end of the day. You are 3,000,000% right that we need rental relief. And there are programs in place, from the Trump administration, right? Like, their first bill, I think, included some rental assistance, and the minute that those websites go up, they fill up, and then they have wait lists. You can't always get help, even if you qualify. And a lot of people don't qualify because they make, a lot of fine print, so that not a lot of people qualify. So, 3,000,000%. Like, we have to grassroots help each other. Like, the government's not going to save us. They're clearly showing us that.
No, it's like, the government of the United States embraces right-wing dictators all the time. Jair Bolsonaro, Donald Trump tried to become friends with Kim Jong-un, but even now, like, Joe Biden is still continuing that friendly relationship with this so-called dictator, this so-called super right-wing government, right? Mm-hmm. But, when you look at the way they treat socialists outside of this country, look at Cuba, the sanctions and the embargoes. For the past 29 years straight, the UN has almost unanimously voted against what we are doing, called it inhumane. And we continue to still do it. We continue to punish these governments. We continue to punish Venezuela with sanctions on their government as well. We continue to have our hands in the debt that is currently being held by Haiti for simply freeing themselves Like all of these things continue to happen because the US perpetuates these narratives. The US perpetuates this violence, and the US occupies areas and countries that they do not fucking agree with. So
Yeah.
why would you think that this same government, this same Democratic Party that has been supporting this, that supported a war criminal like Barack Obama, that really didn't even point out all the different ways that Donald Trump was terrible for foreign policy just for Black people across the globe alone. They focus so much on these irrelevant things. They did not focus on the real harms. And even now with Joe Biden, he bombed Somalia. The border camps are just as filled up, if not more. Like all these different
He
policies are
built.
still being carried out. They're all still being carried out. So clearly this is a right-wing fascist country. Clearly this is a right-wing fascist country.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, why would you think that same right-wing fascist country is going to dismantle itself through policy, through its federal government?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds to me like, I mean, obviously, that you supported what Max Blumenthal did and Franco when they, called some people out. And Max Blumenthal, went up to Adam Schiff and then asked him some questions about the wars that he supported and like why he was clearly being fake enough to pose for a picture with Jesse Jackson, who opposed all of those wars. So can we talk a little bit about, because I think there are a lot of people, especially the people who are hurting the most, who just don't understand why foreign policy relates to them, So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you feel the connection? Where's that connection for people who are like,
well, I really feel like you can't be a leftist if you're not anti-imperialist. Like, foreign policy affects us because we spend 43 billion plus 25 more billion they just added a couple of weeks ago. That's like what, 760 something $billion plus the $35 trillion that the Pentagon cannot account for whatsoever. So all of this endless money of our tax dollars, by the way, gets sucked into this vortex that is the military industrial complex. And it does not even go to the soldiers, to the betterment of, like, I was in the military. It does not go to the betterment of the soldiers' lives.
oh, you're frozen.
Or their livelihoods. So it's just like, where is that money going? It's not a, oh, can you hear me?
No, good now. I'm sorry.
Oh, where is that money going? It's going to private contractors. It's going to, it's going to government officials. It's going to Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. Like, that's where it's going. It's going to these gun manufacturers. It's going to these weapons manufacturers. It's going to other countries as aid packages because money gets passing back and forth between the State Department and the Pentagon all the time, depending on what type of national security is attached to that. So all these billions of dollars you be sending to Israel, like all that money is all of our tax dollars. You know what I'm saying? And there are 46,000 bridges in America that are structurally unsafe. Like, we do not have healthcare for every citizen. Like, there are so many different ways that our imperialist attitudes negatively affect our lives every day. And then on top of that, the US is the number one polluter because of our military alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely 3,000,000% agree. And I think that we are it's our tax money is funding all of these wars, is funding the oppression of other people. But we also, I think one of the other major factors that we don't really put together, right? Because Trump is, one of his big one of his big draws was that, like, oh, well, I'm going to bring back your jobs, right? Like, they were shipping your jobs overseas. I'm going to bring them back. I'm going to start up the coal, whatever. And he couldn't. And the reason he couldn't is because the US is imperialist, right? Because the US goes over to different countries, fucks them up, and then our corporations can go over there and build cheap ass sweatshops and then ship that shit back to us, which we can't afford to buy anymore, right? So that's, those two things combined. Not only are they taking your tax money, they're taking your tax money and then like essentially mowing other people down to then put in factories to force them to work. So yeah, that's I absolutely I can't even yeah, fuck. Yeah.
It's just, the way the US evades accountability for all these things is really ridiculous. And for us to say that this is not the most propagandized nation of all of them, for us to say that this is not one of the most right-wing fascistic nations of all time would literally be ahistorical. This country was founded on stolen land and built by stolen people.
Yeah.
This country was founded on genocide, violence, and white supremacy. And it continues to thrive on that same white supremacy through capitalism and all these different ways. So it's just, it's really about dismantling the roots of violence, especially like globally. The roots of violence usually comes from us and or our allies. So, I know me, like when I think about dismantling violence, when I think about like really dismantling the US empire, I think about fundamentally and unequivocally shrinking the size, if not completely abolishing the military altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we have done nothing but try to be the world police, and we have ruined so many lives and killed so many innocent people. And we need to be held accountable for that, period.
Absolutely. So you were in the military, you said?
Mm-hmm.
And that was was that part of your journey, politically speaking?
Yeah, well, I never really fit into the military to begin with. So I never really had the personality for it. So I had to get up out of there. It definitely gave me like more clarity, and I don't think I really realized it at the time, like when I was getting out, but like now that I'm an organizer and now that I have the language to really connect all of the dots of like what I was feeling when I was there, it makes a lot more sense to me because like I have that background knowledge and that context of saying like, no, like they literally brag about indoctrinating you and making you violent. They literally tell you that you want to just follow orders no matter what and not to think, but just to do, just to be active, just to like combat is your number one MOS. Like, no, like y'all are tripping. Like this is crazy. And so all of the stuff that I felt then when I was like, this is not for me, like now it's just like, this was not for me because I fundamentally understood at that moment that I did not want to be a paid mercenary of the state. And I did not have the language for that then, but when I was told that there are only 3 places in America that institutionalize you, and it's prison, the military, and mental institutions, I said, why the hell why are you grouping it in with those 2 other things? That doesn't sound right. And everybody else in the room was just nodding. And this is my first sergeant though saying this to us during a training session. And everybody's just nodding, like just taking the note. And I'm just looking around at y'all like, what the fuck? Like, I know y'all don't think this shit is normal. Like, there's just no way. So yeah. I wouldn't even say it was a part of my radicalization. I think that, I was already like fundamentally against that shit just as a person. And then, now that I have the education behind it, like it just makes it easier for me to have these conversations,
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. I can't believe you made it because I would not have been able to. Absolutely not. Like the first day I would have said something snarky and then that's it. That would have been the end of me. I mean, that and the physical challenge, I'm sure would also probably do me in immediately.
It's crazy because a lot of people like, I didn't want to be homeless So I went to the military, and the military is a very predatory institution. And it's another way that people are affected by foreign policy. The US military is a very predatory institution. They target lower income, Black and brown people. They target undocumented people. And a lot of these undocumented people, especially, get deported after they serve this country, mind you. So it's a very predatory institution that is literally built upon just straight violence. And when you think about the reasons why we go to war, when you think about the ways in which we engage with other countries that we do not agree with, it's usually for something that has to do with capital or protecting some type of property that we want to acquire. And that is not a good enough reason, I think, for anybody to join the US military. Because, it's not the civilians' jobs to do the dirty work of a disgusting government. And there are people that do it because they got lied to by the recruiters. They got lied to about what the benefits were going to look like. They got lied to about whether they were going to combat or not. Like, there's so many different things they got lied about. They got lied to about bonuses that they never received.
Wow.
It's like the military is not it's literally the new draft. Like, drafting poor people, that's the new draft. Now they don't have to do it mandatorily, because before, like, all the rich people had to do were like Donald Trump did, just avoid that shit somehow. But now it's just like the rich people they're just not going to the offices. They're just not getting recruited because those aren't the people that are being targeted by recruiters.
Yeah. So you feel like also that, like, when you brought, mentioned sort of the military and prisons in the same thought process, would you also say that, like, the upper echelons of the military are white people, and that they are, purposely taking in as many people of color to put in the lower ranks, and maybe, you can be the foot soldiers kind of thing?
I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's more systemic than that. I don't think there's a bunch of like individual white generals that are sitting at the top, like at the Army Corps, but like, I do think it's very systemic in the way that, geographically, these recruiters' offices are only in certain places. When I was in high school, I went to 2 different high schools because I was a rough kid. I liked to fight. So I got moved from high school to high school. The high school that I ended up going to was in the city, and more Black people went there, and recruiters were always at my school when I went to the other high school. And I did not see that at the white school. That was a blue ribbon school with the STEM program. I didn't see all that.
Yeah.
So like, even that, like, recalling that, like, firsthand, you see them preying on certain people. And even like being in the military, when I talked to like a lot of the people that I was, in my platoon, like some of them really wanted to be there because they America. Like, they just really fundamentally believed in serving their country because their granddaddy was a Confederate soldier,
Oh,
which
Lord.
we can unpack. But anyway, I realized that a lot of them were there because they're about to have a baby. A lot of them are there because I need to go to college and I don't know how else to pay for it. I'm taking care of my family. I have a husband and blah, blah, blah. Like all these different things. Like, it was usually socioeconomic reasons why people were there. Like, it was very rarely ideological. And the thing about the military is, and the reason why I feel like so many, military members and so many veterans are so starkly right wing, is because the ideological shift happens within that environment because of the way that you're indoctrinated, and because of the things that I feel like, I didn't go to combat, but when I do talk to combat veterans, some of the things that you kind of have to block out of your mind, because you come home and you reckon with what you are really doing. Daniel Hale told us that 90% of people in a 5-month period that were killed by those drone strikes were not intended targets. So it means they were fucking civilians. Jesus. So imagine if we're killing people with drones, imagine how many civilians are just getting shot point blank by our soldiers, by our Marines, by our sailors.
Yeah.
So it's just, that shit, all of those things change you. You know what I'm saying? and being in a institution that forces nationalism down your throat, where you're not even allowed to criticize the government, it changes your perspective on a lot of things. So I don't know. I'm just glad I didn't have to deal with all of that, I guess.
I'm glad you came through it. We'll put it that way. That sounds like one of the most traumatizing experiences I can imagine. So yeah, good for you.
Had to get up out of there. Definitely had to get
Yeah.
up out of there.
So let me just quickly clarify, like when I was sort of saying, like, is it like white people sending out brown people to kill other brown people? I mean, I didn't necessarily mean that, like, it was about, like, so like when white people hear the words white supremacy, right? Like they automatically think neo-Nazis and KKK members, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that's not white supremacy. White supremacy, I mean, that is white supremacy, but white supremacy is systemic. White supremacy is, not just what an individual believes in, right? So, like you said that there are, certain stations in different areas, but it was definitely, a group of white guys that decided to, put those stations in those places, right? Mm-hmm. It was definitely a group of white guys that said, well, I guess maybe we should encourage them to target these certain kind of people because they'll be most likely a little bit, you know what I'm saying? And I think that, it's really hard for us to conceptualize because also, we see in this country, like, brown people who aren't African American, who haven't gone through that experience, like white people group you all together, right? And a lot of brown people who are not, haven't been here for that many generations, don't necessarily have the same experience with the white community, but we don't see that, right? Like white people don't see that. So my point is that when we have, like, rich individual, like say like an Indian guy or a guy straight from Africa, or some, like, we see that that those people are lawyers or whatever, we see that like there is diversity within the rich, right? Like that's just how white people think of it, right, at this point. So I guess my original point was this, that like I think that the military is definitely using like poor people, and then because they're targeting poor people, they're targeting you guys specifically, they're targeting other brown people specifically, like they are using you to do the most dispensable things that they can think of, and the most despicable, unfortunately. And I think that this is, again, it's like it's harder for white people to see because there are white people in the low class, and I've had this fight with people online where when I bring up race, they're like, oh well, you're saying that, like, I think we had a thread about, somebody clapped back on a thread from us like a month ago or something, where they were like, you're not, if you don't count things only on class lines, like like you're the racist or whatever, and like no, that's not how it works, right? Like I just want to say that yeah, like poor white people are poor, okay? Poor white people are poor, and maybe you live in a trailer park, and maybe everybody that in your life is also poor, okay? But that doesn't mean that if you walk into a situation where it's you and a black person, and then there's a white person behind the counter, they're not going to attend to you first, right? Like that's a part of reality that I think people need to see. And I think that it goes so much beyond that as well, because we are, you know, I don't know. I just feel like I'm right now just kind of rambling on at this point. So feel free to interrupt me, but
So I just think that white people need to understand that white supremacy is more systemic than you think. So, for example, 73.8% of white people own their homes. 45.1% of Black people own their homes. On average, for every white person that has $100, that a Black person has 13. So on average, y'all just come out 3 times. Y'all just come out of your mom's body just 3 times more wealthy than us. Just because you exist.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
This is a systematic, like, it's a systematic ingrained system of white supremacy. And I feel like a lot of white people, when they diminish it to just the KKK or just neo-Nazis, or when they diminish it to just the basic, like the overt, like vigilante racists, but they don't count the racism that has advanced degrees, then they miss a lot of the point. And that's when I feel like a lot of like the more cultural war territory, we get into more of that type of stuff. And I'm not really interested in entertaining any of those conversations, like, because like at the end of the day, as a white person, like, it is not to say that white people are superior in any way, but it is to say that this system has favored you. This system was built by people that look like you and has favored you since this country came into inception in 1619 when the first slaves were brought here.
Right.
Like, so when it comes down to white privilege, when it comes down to, white supremacy is active. White privilege is active because it's still actively happening. We still actively don't have reparations for the Black community. And so it's just like, we need to think of white supremacy more like a verb, like it's an action that's constantly happening every day around our lives, around our wealth, around our community, around the ways in which our community is engaged by our government. Like, I just really wish that white people would open up their understanding to that. Like, at least racist white people, anti-racist white people usually get it, but racist white people are like just, white people that are oblivious, oblivious white people. It's like they miss that whole part of it, that bigger picture. And it's because our American school systems suck. But
That's true. And I just, I just wanted to make sure that we call it out on the left too, because that's not acceptable at all whatsoever. So you said that you didn't want to be homeless, and that was the reason that you went into the military. And I'm firstly sorry to hear that you had that situation. It's fucked up. And secondly, I'm also sorry for white supremacy, because I was in a similar situation and I didn't have to do that. I was going to be homeless, and because I knew other white people that had homes, and then I could rent a place in somebody's house for like, not that much money, or stay at some friend's house on their couch, or literally live with parents, like that's white supremacy. Because we're white and the system said, here, you're white, but because white people took that shit, that wealth from Black people every time they tried to build it, and then gave it to us, and then said, here, white people. So I just want to reinforce that. And, and I thank you guys for doing the work that you do, and for fighting for it. And, I hope that I can help in some way, amplify, all the messages, because we're in this together. And, I don't feel like, you're taking something away from me by helping you fight white supremacy. Like, I think that idea is dumb as hell, because I don't believe that, I believe at any given time there is a finite amount of wealth in the world, but I don't believe that number is anywhere near enough to qualify there being scarcity at all. So I believe that there is enough wealth in this world for everybody to thrive, not just survive, but thrive. And the reason that we're not all doing that is because we allow ourselves to succumb to these kind of hierarchies, and we haven't figured out a way to jump those hurdles yet. And I'm fighting for that. I'm here for complete equity. So thank you.
Yeah. No. I'm so tired.
Thank you so much for coming on. How can everybody find you? We got to do the whole song.
All right. Okay, so everyone can find me on Twitter, Instagram, everything. At Red with 2 D's is Ari. You can find my grassroots org on Instagram at Freedom Fighters DC, and you can find us on Twitter at FFDC 2020. Please donate to my grassroots org.
And go help out Fred Hampton Leftists. They're an amazing network as well. You can find them on YouTube and Ko-fi and Twitter. Go get it.
I'm like the worst at the podcast stuff. Like, honestly, the worst at the podcast stuff. I'm trying to get better with it, but I always forget, like, oh yeah, and I also do a podcast as well, and it's on this network.
Yes. Facts and Fire. Everybody go watch it. It's excellent.
I'm trying to get better with this every day.
Don't even worry about it. You've been working your ass off, and we all see it. So good for you. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.